Digha Nikāya, Sutta number 9. Potthapāda Sutta. Potthapāda and the states of consciousness. Thus have I heard. At one time, the Blessed One was staying at Savatthi in Jeta's grove on Anathapindika's park. At that time, the wandering ascetic Potthapāda was staying at the debating hall built by Queen Mallika. At the hall set around rows of tinduka trees, and with him were staying a group of wanderers, 300 in number. Then the Lord, rising early, took his outer robe and bowl, and went to Savatthi for alms. However, it occurred to him, it is too early to go to Savatthi for alms. Suppose I were to go to the debating hall to see the wanderer Potthapāda at the park of Queen Mallika. And so he did. There, Potthapāda was found sitting with his crowd of wanderers, shouting and making a great noise and a great commotion, indulging in various kinds of unedifying conversation, such as talk about kings, robbers, ministers, armies, dangers, wars, food, drink, clothes, beds, garlands, perfumes, relatives, carriages, villages, towns, cities, countries, women, heroes, warriors, street and well gossip, talk of the departed, desultory chat, speculations about land and sea, talk of being and non-being. When Potthapāda saw the Lord approaching from a distance, he quickly told his followers to come to order, saying, "Sirs, be quiet. Do not make noise, sirs. The recluse Gotama is approaching, and he is known to like quiet and speak in praise of quiet. If he sees that this company is quiet, perhaps he will want to approach and come and visit us." At this, the wanderers fell silent. Then the Blessed One came to Potthapāda, who said, "Venerable Sir, welcome, welcome, Venerable Sir, please come. At last, the Venerable Gautama has gone out of his way to come here. Please be seated, Lord. A seat is prepared for you." Then the Blessed One sat down on the prepared seat, and Potthapāda, taking a low seat, sat down to one side. Then the Lord said, "Potthapāda, what were you all talking about? What conversation have I interrupted?" Potthapāda replied, "Lord, never mind the conversation we were having just now. It will not be difficult for the Lord to hear about that later. In the past few days, Venerable Sir, the discussion among the recluses and Brahmins of various schools sitting together and meeting in the debating hall has been concerning the higher extinction of consciousness, and how this takes place. Some said, one's perceptions arise and cease without cause or condition. When they arise, one is conscious. When they cease, then one is unconscious. That is how they explained it. But someone else said, no, that is not how it is. Perceptions are a person's self, part of oneself, which comes and goes. When it comes, one is conscious. When it goes, one is unconscious. Another said, that is not how it is. There are recluses and Brahmins of great powers, of great influence. They draw down consciousness into a man and also withdraw it. When they draw it down into him, he is conscious. When they withdraw it, he is unconscious. It was in this connection that I thought of the Lord. Ah, surely the Blessed One, the Tathagata, he is supremely skilled about these matters. The Blessed One well understands the higher extinction of consciousness. What then, Blessed Lord, is this higher extinction of consciousness? In this matter, Potthapāda, those recluses and Brahmins who say one's perceptions arise and cease without cause or condition are completely wrong. Why is that? One's perceptions arise and cease owing to sets of causes and conditions. Some perceptions arise through training, and some pass away through training. What is this training? The Lord said, Potthapāda, a Tathagata arises in the world, accomplished, fully awakened, perfect in true knowledge and conduct, sublime knower of worlds, incomparable leader of persons to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, enlightened, blessed. He declares this world with its gods, its maras, and its brahmas, this generation with its recluses and Brahmins, its princes and its people, which he has himself realized by direct knowledge. He teaches the Dhamma that is good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end, with the right meaning and phrasing, and he reveals a holy life that is utterly perfect and pure. A householder, or householder's son, or one born in some other clan, hears the Dhamma. On hearing the Dhamma, he acquires faith in the Tathagata. Possessing that faith, he considers thus: household life is crowded and dusty. Life gone forth is wide open. It is not easy while living in a home to lead the holy life utterly perfect and pure as a polished shell. Suppose I shave off my hair and beard, put on the saffron robe, and go forth from the home life into homelessness. On a later occasion, abandoning a small or a large fortune, abandoning a small or a large circle of relatives, he shaves off his hair and beard, puts on the saffron robe, and goes forth from the home life into homelessness. When he has thus gone forth, he lives restrained by the restraint of the Patimokkha, possessed of proper behavior and resort. Having taken up the rules of training, he trains himself in them, seeing danger in the slightest faults. He comes to be endowed with wholesome bodily and verbal action. His lifestyle is purified, and he is possessed of virtue. He guards the doors of his sense faculties, is endowed with mindfulness and clear comprehension, and is content. And how, Potthapāda, is the Bhikkhu possessed of virtue? Here, Potthapāda, having abandoned the destruction of life, the Bhikkhu abstains from the destruction of life. He has laid down the rod and weapon and dwells conscientious, full of loving kindness and compassion for the welfare of all living beings. This pertains to his virtue. Having abandoned taking what is not given, he abstains from taking what is not given, expecting and accepting only what is given. He lives in honesty with a pure mind. This too pertains to his virtue. Having abandoned non-celibacy, he leads the holy life of celibacy. He dwells aloof and abstains from the vulgar practice of sexual intercourse. This too pertains to his virtue. Having abandoned false speech, he abstains from false speech. He speaks only the truth. He lives devoted to truth, trustworthy and reliable. He does not deceive anyone in the world. This too pertains to his virtue. Having abandoned slander, he abstains from slander. He does not repeat elsewhere what he has heard here in order to divide others from the people here, nor does he repeat here what he has heard elsewhere in order to divide these people from those. Thus he is a reconciler of those who are divided, and a promoter of friendships. Rejoicing, delighting, and exulting in concord, he speaks only words that are conducive to concord. This too pertains to his virtue. Having abandoned harsh speech, he abstains from harsh speech. He speaks only such words as are gentle, pleasing to the ear, endearing, going to the heart, polite, amiable, and agreeable to the many. This too pertains to his virtue. Having abandoned idle chatter, he abstains from idle chatter. He speaks at the right time, speaks what is true and beneficial, speaks on the Dhamma and the discipline. His words are worth treasuring. They are timely, supported by reason, measured, and connected with the good. This too pertains to his virtue. He abstains from damaging seed and plant life. He eats only in one part of the day, refraining from food at night and from eating at improper times. He abstains from dancing, singing, instrumental music, and from witnessing unsuitable shows. He abstains from wearing garlands, embellishing himself with scents, and beautifying himself with unguents. He abstains from high and luxurious beds and seats, from accepting gold and silver, from accepting uncooked grain, raw meat, women and girls, male and female slaves, goats and sheep, fowl and swine, elephants, cattle, horses, and mares. He abstains from accepting fields and lands, from running messages and errands, from buying and selling, from dealing with false weights, false metals, and false measures. He abstains from the crooked ways of bribery, deception, and fraud, from mutilating, executing, imprisoning, robbery, plunder, and violence. This too pertains to his virtue. Whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on food offered by the faithful, continually cause damage to seed and plant life, to plants propagated from roots, stems, joints, buds, and seeds, he abstains from damaging seed and plant life. This too pertains to his virtue. Whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on food offered by the faithful, enjoy the use of stored-up goods, such as stored-up food, drinks, garments, vehicles, bedding, scents, and comestibles, he abstains from the use of stored-up goods. This too pertains to his virtue. Whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on food offered by the faithful, attend unsuitable shows, such as those featuring dancing, singing, or instrumental music, theatrical performances, narrations of legends, music played by hand-clapping, cymbals and drums, picture houses, acrobatic performances, combats of elephants, horses, buffaloes, bulls, goats, rams, roosters, and quails, stick fighting, boxing and wrestling, sham fights, roll calls, battle arrays, and regimental reviews. He abstains from attending such unsuitable shows. This too pertains to his virtue. Whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on food offered by the faithful, indulge in the following games and recreations: board games played on an 8-row chessboard or 10-row chessboard, games played by imagining a board in the air, hopscotch, spillykins, dice games, games involving hitting sticks, games played by dipping the hand in paint or dye, ball games, blowing through toy pipes, plowing with miniature plows, somersaults, playing with paper windmills, with toy measures, with toy chariots, with toy bows, guessing at letters written in the air, or guessing others' thoughts, charades. He abstains from such games that are a basis for negligence. This too pertains to his virtue. Whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on food offered by the faithful, enjoy the use of high and luxurious beds and seats, such as spacious couches, thrones with animal figures carved on the supports, long-haired coverlets, multicolored patchwork coverlets, white woolen coverlets embroidered with flowers, quilts stuffed with cotton, woolen coverlets embroidered with animal figures, or those with hair on both sides or on one side, bedspreads embroidered with gems, silk coverlets, dance hall carpets, elephant, horse, or chariot rugs, rugs of antelope skins, choice spreads made of kadali deer hides, spreads with red awnings overhead, couches with red cushions for head and feet. He abstains from the use of such high and luxurious beds and seats. This too pertains to his virtue. Whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on food offered by the faithful, enjoy the use of such devices for embellishing and beautifying themselves as the following: rubbing scented powders into the body, massaging with oils, bathing in perfumed water, kneading the limbs, mirrors, ointments, garlands, scents, unguents, face powders, makeup, bracelets, headbands, decorated walking sticks, ornamented medicine tubes, rapiers, sunshades, embroidered sandals, turbans, diadems, yak-tail whisks, and long-fringed white robes. He abstains from the use of such devices for embellishment and beautification. This too pertains to his virtue. Whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on the food offered by the faithful, engage in frivolous chatter, such as talk about kings, thieves, and ministers of state, talk about armies, dangers, and wars, talk about food, drink, garments, and lodgings, talk about garlands and scents, talk about relations, vehicles, villages, towns, cities, and countries, talk about women and talk about heroes, street talk and talk by the well, talk about those departed in days gone by, rambling chit-chat, speculations about the world and about the sea, talk about gain and loss. He abstains from such frivolous chatter. This too pertains to his virtue. Whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on the food offered by the faithful, engage in wrangling argumentation, saying to one another, "You don't understand this doctrine and discipline. It is I who understand this doctrine and discipline. How can you understand this doctrine and discipline? You're practicing the wrong way. I'm practicing the right way. I'm being consistent. You're inconsistent. What should have been said first, you said last. What should have been said last, you said first. What you took so long to think out has been confuted. Your doctrine has been refuted. You are defeated. Go, try to save your doctrine, or disentangle yourself now if you can." He abstains from such wrangling argumentation. This too pertains to his virtue. Whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on the food offered by the faithful, engage in running messages and errands for kings, ministers of state, Khatriyas in the warrior class, Brahmins, householders, or youths, who command them, "Go here, go there, take this, bring that from there." He abstains from running such messages and errands. This too pertains to his virtue. Whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on the food offered by the faithful, engage in scheming, talking, hinting, belittling others, and pursuing gain with gain, he abstains from such kinds of scheming and talking. This too pertains to his moral discipline. Whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on the food offered by the faithful, earn their living by a wrong means of lifestyle, by such debased arts as predicting long life, prosperity, etc., or the reverse, from the marks on a person's body, predicting by means of omens and signs, making auguries on the basis of thunderbolts and celestial portents, interpreting ominous dreams, telling fortunes from marks on the body, making auguries from the marks on cloth gnawed by mice, offering fire oblations, offering oblations from a ladle, oblations of husks, rice powder, rice grains, ghee and oil to the gods, offering oblations from the mouth, offering blood sacrifices to the gods, making predictions based on the fingertips, determining whether the site for a proposed house or garden is favorable or not, making predictions for officers of state, laying demons in a cemetery, laying ghosts, knowledge of charms to be pronounced by one living in an earthen house, snake charming, the poison craft, scorpion craft, rat craft, bird craft, crow craft, foretelling the number of years that a man has to live, reciting charms to give protection from arrows, reciting charms to understand the language of animals. He abstains from such wrong means of lifestyle, from such debased arts. This too pertains to his virtue. Whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on the food offered by the faithful, earn their living by a wrong means of lifestyle, by such debased arts as interpreting the significance of the color, shape, and other features of the following items to determine whether they bring about fortune or misfortune for their owners: gems, garments, staffs, swords, spears, arrows, bows, other weapons, women, men, boys, girls, slaves, slave women, elephants, horses, buffaloes, bulls, cows, goats, rams, fowl, quails, lizards, earrings, tortoises, and other animals. He abstains from such wrong means of lifestyle, from such debased arts. This too pertains to his virtue. Whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on the food offered by the faithful, earn their living by wrong means of lifestyle, by such debased arts as making predictions to the effect that the king will march forth, the king will return, our king will attack and the enemy king will retreat, our enemy king will attack and our king will retreat, our king will triumph and the enemy king will be defeated, the enemy king will triumph and our king will be defeated. Thus there will be victory for one and defeat for the other. He abstains from such wrong means of lifestyle, from such debased arts. This too pertains to his virtue. Whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on the food offered by the faithful, earn their living by wrong means of lifestyle, by such debased arts as predicting that there will be an eclipse of the moon, an eclipse of the sun, an eclipse of a constellation. The sun and the moon will go on their proper courses. There will be an aberration of the sun and moon. The constellations will go on their proper courses. There will be an aberration of a constellation. There will be a fall of meteors. There will be a sky blaze. There will be an earthquake. There will be an earth roar. There will be a rising and setting, a darkening and brightening of the moon, sun, and constellations. Such will be the result of the moon's eclipse, such the result of the sun's eclipse, and so on, down to such will be the result of the rising and setting, darkening and brightening of the moon, sun, and constellations. He abstains from such wrong means of lifestyle, from such debased arts. This too pertains to his virtue. Whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on the food offered by the faithful, earn their living by wrong means of lifestyle, by such debased arts as predicting that there will be abundant rain, there will be a drought, there will be a good harvest, there will be a famine, there will be security, there will be danger, there will be sickness, there will be health, or they earn their living by accounting, computation, calculation, the composing of poetry, and speculations about the world. He abstains from such wrong means of lifestyle, from such debased arts. This too pertains to his virtue. Whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on the food offered by the faithful, earn their living by wrong means of lifestyle, by such debased arts as arranging auspicious dates for marriages, both those in which the bride is brought home and those in which she is sent out, arranging auspicious dates for betrothals and divorces, arranging auspicious dates for the accumulation or expenditure of money, reciting charms to make people lucky or unlucky, rejuvenating the fetuses of abortive women, reciting spells to bind a man's tongue, to paralyze his jaw, to make him lose control over his hands, or to bring on deafness, obtaining oracular answers to questions by means of a mirror, a girl, or a god, worshipping the sun, worshipping Mahabrahma, bringing forth flames from the mouth, invoking the goddess of luck. He abstains from such wrong means of lifestyle, from such debased arts. This too pertains to his virtue. Whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on the food offered by the faithful, earn their living by wrong means of lifestyle, by such debased arts as promising gifts to deities in return for favors, fulfilling such promises, demonology, reciting spells after entering an earthen house, inducing virility and impotence, preparing and consecrating sites for a house, giving ceremonial mouthwashes and ceremonial bathing, offering sacrificial fires, administering emetics, purgatives, expectorants, and phlegmagogues, administering medicines through the ear and through the nose, administering ointments and counter-ointments, practicing fine surgery on the eyes and ears, practicing general surgery on the body, practicing as a children's doctor. He abstains from such wrong means of lifestyle, from such debased arts. This too pertains to his virtue. Potthapāda. The bhikkhu who is thus possessed of virtue sees no danger anywhere in regard to his restraint by virtue. Just as a head-anointed noble warrior who has defeated his enemies sees no danger anywhere from his enemies, so the bhikkhu who is thus possessed of virtue sees no danger anywhere in regard to his restraint by virtue. Endowed with this noble aggregate of virtue, he experiences within himself a blameless happiness. In this way, Potthapāda, the bhikkhu is possessed of virtue. And how, Potthapāda, does the bhikkhu guard the doors of his sense faculties? Here, Potthapāda, having seen a form with the eye, the bhikkhu does not grasp at its signs or its features. Since if he were to dwell without restraint over the faculty of the eye, evil, unwholesome states such as covetousness and grief might invade him. He practices restraint, guards the faculty of the eye, and achieves restraint over the faculty of the eye. Having heard a sound with the ear, the bhikkhu does not grasp at its signs or its features. Since if he were to dwell without restraint over the faculty of the ear, evil, unwholesome states such as covetousness and grief might invade him. He practices restraint, guards the faculty of the ear, and achieves restraint over the faculty of the ear. Having smelled an odor with the nose, the bhikkhu does not grasp at its signs or its features. Since if he were to dwell without restraint over the faculty of the nose, evil, unwholesome states such as covetousness and grief might invade him. He practices restraint, guards the faculty of the nose, and achieves restraint over the faculty of the nose. Having tasted a flavor with the tongue, the bhikkhu does not grasp at its signs or its features. Since if he were to dwell without restraint over the faculty of the tongue, evil unwholesome states such as covetousness and grief might invade him. He practices restraint, guards the faculty of the tongue, and he achieves restraint over the faculty of the tongue. Having touched a tangible object with the body, the bhikkhu does not grasp at its signs or its features, since if he were to dwell without restraint over the faculty of the body, evil unwholesome states such as covetousness and grief might invade him. He practices restraint, guards the faculty of the body, and achieves restraint over the faculty of the body. Having cognized a mind object with the mind, the bhikkhu does not grasp at its signs or its features, since if he were to dwell without restraint over the faculty of the mind, evil unwholesome states such as covetousness and grief might invade him. He practices restraint, guards the faculty of the mind, and achieves restraint over the faculty of the mind. Endowed with this noble restraint of the sense faculties, he experiences within himself an unblemished happiness. In this way, Potthapāda, the bhikkhu guards the doors of the sense faculties. And how, Potthapāda, is the bhikkhu endowed with mindfulness and clear comprehension? Here, Potthapāda, in going forward and returning, the bhikkhu acts with clear comprehension. In looking ahead and looking aside, he acts with clear comprehension. In bending and stretching his limbs, he acts with clear comprehension. In wearing his robes and using his alms bowl, he acts with clear comprehension. In eating, drinking, chewing, and tasting, he acts with clear comprehension. In defecating and urinating, he acts with clear comprehension. In going, standing, sitting, lying down, waking up, speaking, and remaining silent, he acts with clear comprehension. In this way, Potthapāda, the bhikkhu is endowed with mindfulness and clear comprehension. And how, Potthapāda, is the bhikkhu content? Here, Potthapāda, a bhikkhu is content with robes to protect his body and alms food to sustain his belly. Wherever he goes, he sets out, taking only his requisites along with him. Just as a bird, wherever it goes, flies with its wings as its only burden. In the same way, a bhikkhu is content with robes to protect his body and alms food to sustain his belly. Wherever he goes, he sets out, taking only his requisites along with him. In this way, Potthapāda, the bhikkhu is content. Endowed with this noble aggregate of virtue, this noble restraint over the sense faculties, this noble mindfulness and clear comprehension, and this noble contentment, he resorts to a secluded dwelling, a forest, the foot of a tree, a mountain, a glen, a hillside cave, a cremation ground, a jungle thicket, the open air, a heap of straw. After returning from his alms round, following his meal, he sits down, crosses his legs, holds his body erect, and sets up mindfulness before him. Having abandoned covetousness for the world, he dwells with a mind free from covetousness. He purifies his mind from covetousness. Having abandoned ill will and hatred, he dwells with loving kindness and compassion for the welfare of all living beings. He purifies his mind from ill will and hatred. Having abandoned sloth and torpor, he dwells perceiving light, mindful and clearly comprehending. He purifies his mind from sloth and torpor. Having abandoned restlessness and worry, he dwells at ease within himself, with a peaceful mind. He purifies his mind from restlessness and worry. Having abandoned doubt, he dwells as one who has passed beyond doubt, unperplexed about wholesome states. He purifies his mind from doubt. Potthapāda, suppose a man were to take a loan and apply it towards his business, and his business were to succeed. so that he could pay back his old debts and would have enough money left over to maintain a wife and family. He would reflect on this, and as a result he would become glad and experience joy. Again, Potthapāda, suppose a man were to become ill, afflicted, gravely sick, so that he could not enjoy his food and his strength would decline. After some time he would recover from that illness and would enjoy his food and regain his bodily strength. He would reflect on this, and as a result he would become glad and experience joy. Again, Potthapāda, suppose a man were locked up in a prison. After some time he would be released from prison, safe and secure, with no loss of his possessions. He would reflect on this, and as a result he would become glad and experience joy. Again, Potthapāda, suppose a man were a slave, without independence, subservient to others, unable to go where he wants. After some time he would be released from slavery and gain his independence. He would no longer be subservient to others, but a free man able to go where he wants. He would reflect on this, and as a result he would become glad and experience joy. Again, Potthapāda, suppose a man with wealth and possessions were traveling along a desert road where food was scarce and dangers were many. After some time he would cross over the desert and arrive safely at a village which is safe and free from danger. He would reflect on this, and as a result he would become glad and experience joy. In the same way, Potthapāda, when a bhikkhu sees that these 5 hindrances are unabandoned within himself, he regards that as a debt, as a sickness, as confinement in prison, as slavery, as a desert road. But when he sees that these 5 hindrances have been abandoned within himself, he regards that as freedom from debt, as good health, as release from prison, as freedom from slavery, as a place of safety. When he sees that these 5 hindrances have been abandoned within himself, gladness arises. When he is gladdened, joy arises. When his mind is filled with joy, his body becomes tranquil. Tranquil in body, he experiences happiness. Being happy, his mind becomes collected. Quite secluded from sense pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, he enters and dwells in the first jhana, which is accompanied by thinking and pondering, and filled with the joy and happiness born of seclusion. He drenches, steeps, saturates, and suffuses his body with this joy and happiness born of seclusion, so that there is no part of his entire body which is not suffused by this joy and happiness. Potthapāda, suppose a skilled bath attendant or his apprentice were to pour soap powder into a metal basin, sprinkle it with water, and knead it into a ball, so that the ball of soap powder be pervaded by moisture, encompassed by moisture, suffused with moisture inside and out, yet it would not trickle. In the same way, Potthapāda, the bhikkhu drenches, steeps, saturates, and suffuses his body with the joy and happiness born of seclusion, so that there is no part of his entire body which is not suffused by this joy and happiness. This, Potthapāda, is a visible fruit of recluseship, more excellent and sublime than the previous ones. Having reached the first jhana, the bhikkhu remains in it, and whatever sensations of lust that he previously had disappear. At that time there is present in him a true but subtle perception of delight and happiness, born of detachment, and he becomes one who is conscious of this delight and happiness. In this way, some perceptions arise through training, and some pass away through training, and this is that training, said the Blessed One. Again, a bhikkhu, with the subsiding of thinking and pondering, and by gaining inner tranquility and unity of mind, reaches and remains in the second jhana, which is free from thinking and pondering, born of collectedness of mind, filled with joy and happiness. His former true but subtle perception of joy and happiness, born of seclusion, vanishes. At that time there arises a true but subtle perception of joy and happiness, born of collectedness of mind, and he becomes one who is conscious of this joy and happiness. In this way, some perceptions arise through training and some pass away through training. Again, after the fading away of joy, he dwells in equanimity, mindful and clearly aware, and he experiences in his body that pleasant feeling of which the noble ones say, he dwells happily with equanimity and mindfulness, and he reaches and remains in the third jhana. His former true but subtle sense of joy and happiness, born of collectedness of mind, vanishes, and there arises at that time a true but subtle sense of equanimity and happiness, and he becomes one who is conscious of this true but subtle sense of equanimity and happiness. In this way, some perceptions arise through training and some pass away through training. Again, with the abandoning of pleasure and pain, and with the previous disappearance of joy and grief, he reaches and remains in the fourth jhana, a state beyond pleasure and pain, purified by equanimity and mindfulness. His former true but subtle sense of equanimity and happiness vanishes, and there arises a true but subtle sense of neither happiness nor unhappiness, and he becomes one who is conscious of this true but subtle sense of neither happiness nor unhappiness. In this way, some perceptions arise through training, and some pass away through training. Again, by passing entirely beyond bodily sensations, by the disappearance of all sense of resistance, and by non-attraction to the perception of diversity, seeing that space is infinite, he reaches and remains in the sphere of infinite space. In this way, some perceptions arise through training, and some pass away through training. Again, by passing entirely beyond the sphere of infinite space, seeing that consciousness is infinite, he reaches and remains in the sphere of infinite consciousness. In this way, some perceptions arise through training and some pass away through training. Again, by passing entirely beyond the sphere of infinite consciousness, seeing that there is nothing, he reaches and remains in the sphere of nothingness, and he becomes one who is conscious of this true but subtle perception of the sphere of nothingness. In this way, some perceptions arise through training, and some pass away through training. And this is that training, said the Blessed One. Potthapāda. From the moment when a bhikkhu has gained this controlled perception, he proceeds from stage to stage till he reaches the limit of perception. When he has reached the limit of perception, it occurs to him, mental activity is inferior. Lack of mental activity is superior. If I were to think and imagine, these perceptions that I have attained would cease, and coarser perceptions would arise in me. Suppose I were not to think or imagine. So he neither thinks nor imagines, and then, in him, just these perceptions arise. But other, coarse perceptions do not arise. He attains cessation. And that, Potthapāda, is the way in which the cessation of perception is brought about by successive steps. What do you think, Potthapāda? Have you heard of this before? No, Blessed Lord. As I understand it, the Blessed One has said, Potthapāda, from the moment when a bhikkhu has gained this controlled perception, he proceeds from stage to stage until he reaches the limit of perception. When he has reached the limit of perception, it occurs to him, mental activity is inferior. Lack of mental activity is superior. If I were to think and imagine, these perceptions that I have attained would cease, and coarser perceptions would arise in me. Suppose I were not to think or imagine. So he neither thinks nor imagines, and then in him just these perceptions arise, but other, coarser perceptions do not arise. He attains cessation, and that, Potthapāda, is the way in which the cessation of perception is brought about by successive steps. That is correct, Potthapāda. Lord, do you teach that the summit of perception is just one, or that it is many? I teach it as both one and many, Potthapāda. Blessed One, how is it one, and how is it many? It depends as to whether he attains successively to the cessation of each perception. So I teach the summit of that perception. Thus, I teach both one summit of perception, and I also teach many. Blessed One, does perception arise before knowledge, or knowledge arises before perception, or do both arise simultaneously? Perception arises first, Potthapāda, then knowledge, and from the arising of perception comes the arising of knowledge. And one knows, thus conditioned, knowledge arises. In this way, you can see how perception arises first, and then knowledge, and that from the arising of perception comes the arising of knowledge. Blessed One, is perception a person's self, or is perception one thing and self another? Well, Potthapāda, do you postulate a self? Lord, I postulate a gross self, material, composed of the 4 primary elements, and feeding on solid food. But with such a gross self, Potthapāda, perception would be one thing, and the self another. You can see that in this way. Given such a gross self, certain perceptions would arise in a person, and others pass away. In this way, you can see that perception must be one thing, the self another. Lord, I postulate a mind-made self, complete with all its parts, not defective in any faculty or sense organ. But with such a mind-made self, perception would be one thing and the self another. You can see that in this way, given such a mind-made self, complete with all its parts, not defective in any sense organ, certain perceptions would arise in a person and others pass away. In this way, you can see that perception must be one thing, the self another. Blessed One, I assume a formless self, made up of perception. But Potthapāda, with such a formless self, perception would be one thing and self another. You can see that in this way. Given such a formless self, made up of perception, certain perceptions would arise in a person and others pass away. In this way, you can see that perception must be one thing, the self another. But Lord, is it possible for me to know whether perception is a person's self, or whether perception is one thing, and self another? Potthapāda, it is difficult for one of different views, a different faith, under different influences, with different pursuits and different training, to know whether these are 2 different things or not. In that case, blessed Lord, if this question of self and perceptions is difficult for one like me, please tell me, is the world eternal? Is only this true and the opposite false? Potthapāda. I have not declared that the world is eternal and that the opposite view is false. Well, Lord, is the world not eternal? Potthapāda. I have not declared that the world is not eternal. Well, Lord, is the world infinite? Potthapāda. I did not declare that the world is infinite. Well, Lord, is the world not infinite? Potthapāda. I have not declared either that the world is not infinite. I have not declared that the world is not infinite and that the opposite view is false. In that case, blessed Lord, is the soul the same as the body? Potthapāda. I have not declared that the soul is the same as the body. Well, blessed Lord, is the soul one thing and the body another? Potthapāda. I did not declare that the soul is one thing and the body another. Well, Lord, does the Tathagata exist after death? Is only this true and all else false? Potthapāda. I have not declared that the Tathagata exists after death. In that case, Lord, does the Tathagata not exist after death? Potthapāda. I did not declare that the Tathagata does not exist after death. Well, Lord, does the Tathagata both exist and not exist after death? Potthapāda. I did not declare either that the Tathagata both exists and does not exist after death. Well, Lord, does the Tathagata neither exist nor not exist after death? Potthapāda. I did not declare either that the Tathagata neither exists nor does not exist after death, and that all else is false. But, Lord, why has the Blessed One not declared these things? Potthapāda. That is not conducive to the purpose, not conducive to the Dhamma. It is not the way to embark on the holy life. It does not lead to disenchantment, to dispassion, to cessation, to calm, to higher knowledge, to awakening, to Nibbāna. That is the reason why I have not declared it. But, blessed Lord, what has the Lord declared? Potthapāda. I have declared, this is suffering, this is the origin of suffering, this is the cessation of suffering, and this is the path leading to the cessation of suffering. But, Lord, why has the Lord declared this? Because, Potthapāda, this is conducive to the purpose, conducive to Dhamma, the way to embark on the holy life. It leads to disenchantment, to dispassion, to cessation, to calm, to higher knowledge, to awakening, to Nibbāna. That is why I have declared it. So it is, Blessed One, so it is, Tathagata. And now is the time for the Blessed One to do as he sees fit. Then the Blessed One rose from his seat and went away. Then the wanderers, as soon as the Blessed One had left, reproached, sneered, and jeered at Potthapāda from all sides, saying, "Whatever the recluse Gotama says, Potthapāda agrees with him. So it is, Blessed Lord, so it is, Tathagata. We don't understand a word of the recluse Gotama's whole discourse. Is the world eternal or not? Is it finite or infinite? Is the soul the same as the body or different? Does the Tathagata exist after death or not, or both, or neither?" Potthapāda replied to them, "I do not understand either about whether the world is eternal or not. as to whether it is finite or infinite, whether the soul is the same as the body or different, or whether the Tathagata exists after death or not, or both, or neither. But the recluse Gotama teaches a true and real way of practice which is in accordance with the Dhamma and grounded in the Dhamma. And why should not a man like me express approval of such a true and real practice, so well taught by the recluse Gotama? 2 or 3 days later, Citta, the son of the elephant trainer, went with Potthapāda to see the Blessed One. Citta prostrated himself before the Blessed One and sat down to one side. Potthapāda exchanged courtesies with the Blessed One, then sat down to one side, and told him what had occurred after the Blessed One had left. Potthapāda, all those wanderers are blind and sightless. You alone among them are with sight. Some things I have taught and pointed out, Potthapāda, as being certain, others as being uncertain. Which are the things I have pointed out as uncertain? The world is eternal, I have declared to be uncertain. The world is not eternal, I have declared uncertain. The world is finite, I have declared uncertain. The world is not finite, I have declared uncertain. The world is neither finite nor infinite, I have declared uncertain. The soul is the same as the body, I have declared uncertain. The soul is one thing and the body another, I have declared uncertain. Does the Tathagata exist after death? I have declared uncertain. Does the Tathagata not exist after death? I have declared uncertain. Does the Tathagata both exist and not exist after death? I have declared uncertain. Does the Tathagata neither exist nor not exist after death? I have declared uncertain. And why is that, Potthapāda? Because they are not conducive to the purpose, not conducive to the Dhamma, not conducive to the way to embark on the holy life. These do not lead to disenchantment, to dispassion, to cessation, to calm, to higher knowledge, to awakening, to Nibbāna. That is why I have declared them as uncertain. But what things have I pointed out as certain? This is suffering. This is the origin of suffering. This is the cessation of suffering. This is the path leading to the cessation of suffering. Why is that? Because they are conducive to the purpose, conducive to Dhamma, to the way to embark on the holy life. They lead to disenchantment, to dispassion, to cessation, to calm, to higher knowledge, to awakening, to Nibbāna. That is why I have declared them as certain. Potthapāda, there are some recluses and Brahmins who declare and believe that after death the self is entirely happy and free from disease. I approached them and asked if this was indeed what they declared and believed, and they replied, "Yes, sir." Then I said, "Do you, friends, living in the world, know and see it as an entirely happy place?" And they replied, "No, sir." Then I asked them, "Have you ever experienced a single night or day, or half a night or a day, that was entirely happy?" And they replied, "No, sir." Then I asked further, "Do you know a path or a practice whereby an entirely happy world might be brought about?" And they replied, "No, sir." I said, "Have you heard the voices of deities who have been reborn in an entirely happy world, saying, 'The attainment of an entirely happy world has been well and rightly gained, and we, sirs, have been reborn in such a realm? And they replied, No, sir. What do you think, Potthapāda? Such being the case, does not the talk of those recluses and Brahmins turn out to be quite stupid? It is just as if a man were to say, I am going to seek out and love the most beautiful girl in the country. They might say to him, Well, as to this most beautiful girl in the country, do you know whether she belongs to the Khattiya or warrior class, the Brahmins, the merchant, or the worker class? And he would say, No, sirs. Then they might say, Well, do you know her name, her clan, whether she is tall or short or of medium height, whether she is dark or light complexioned, or what village or town or city she comes from? And he would say, No, sirs. And they might say, Well then, you don't know or see the one you seek for and desire? And he would say, No, sirs. Does not the talk of that man turn out to be quite stupid? Certainly, blessed one. And so it is with those recluses and Brahmins who declare and believe that after death the self is entirely happy and free from disease. Does not their talk turn out to be quite stupid? Certainly, blessed Lord. It is just as if a man were to build a staircase for a palace at a crossroads. People might say to him, Well now, this staircase for a palace that you are building, do you know whether the palace will face east or west or north or south, or whether it will be high, low, or of medium height? And he would say, No, sirs. And they might say, Well then, you don't know or see what kind of a palace you are building the staircase for. And he would say, No, sirs. Don't you think that that man's talk would turn out to be quite stupid? Certainly, blessed Lord. Potthapāda. There are some recluses and Brahmins who declare and believe that after death the self is entirely happy and free from disease. I approached them and asked if this was indeed what they declared and believed, and they replied, Yes. Then I said, Do you, friends, living in the world, know and see it as an entirely happy place? And they replied, No, sir. I said, Have you ever experienced a single night or day, or half a night or day, that was entirely happy? And they replied, No, sir. I said, Do you know a path or a practice whereby an entirely happy world might be brought about? And they replied again, No, sir. I said, Have you heard the voices of deities who have been reborn in an entirely happy world, saying, The attainment of an entirely happy world has been well and rightly achieved, and we, gentlemen, have been reborn in such a realm? And they replied, No, sir. What do you think, Potthapāda? Such being the case, does not the talk of those recluses and Brahmins turn out to be quite stupid? Certainly, blessed Lord. Potthapāda. There are three kinds of commonly assumed self: material self, mind-made self, and formless self. What is the material assumed self? It has form, is composed of the four primary elements, nourished by material food. And what is the mind-made self? It has form, complete with all its parts, not defective in any sense organ or faculty. And what is the formless acquired self? It is without form and made up of perception. I, however, Potthapāda, teach a doctrine that leads to the abandoning of the mistaken assumption about the assumed material self. If you follow this doctrine, unwholesome mental states will disappear, and those states which tend to purification will increase. and one will realize and remain in the full perception and purity of wisdom here and now. I teach a doctrine that leads to the abandoning of the mistaken assumption about the mind-made self. If you follow this doctrine, unwholesome mental states will disappear, and those states which tend to purification will increase, and one will realize and remain in the full perfection and purity of wisdom here and now. I teach a doctrine, Potthapāda, that leads to the abandoning of the mistaken assumption of the formless self. If you follow this doctrine, unwholesome mental states will disappear, and the states which tend to purification will increase, and one will realize and remain in the full perfection and purity of wisdom here and now. Now, it might be so, Potthapāda, that you think even if one's unwholesome mental states disappear, and the states which tend to purification increase, and one realizes and remains in the full perfection and purity of wisdom here and now, that one might continue to be quite unhappy. However, Potthapāda, that would be inaccurate. When such conditions are fulfilled, then there will only be joy and happiness, calm, continual mindfulness, and clear comprehension. That is a happy state. Now, Potthapāda, if others were to ask us, what friend is this material assumed self whose abandonment you preach? Being so asked, we should reply, this is that gross material form, for the getting rid of which we teach a doctrine of purification, to grow strong, whereby one gains and remains in the purity and perfection of wisdom here and now. If others ask, what is this mind-made acquired self, whose abandonment you preach? Being so asked, we should reply, this is that mind-made acquired self, for the purification of which allows one to grow strong, whereby one gains and remains in the purity and perfection of wisdom here and now. If others were to ask us, what is this formless acquired self? Being so asked, we should reply, this is that formless acquired self, for the abandonment of which we preach the purification whereby one grows strong, and one gains and remains in the purity and perfection of wisdom here and now. What do you think, Potthapāda? Does not that statement turn out to be well-founded? Certainly, blessed Lord. It is just as if a man were to build a staircase for a palace, which was below that palace. They might say to him, well now, this staircase for a palace that you are building, do you know whether the palace will face east, or west, or north, or south, or whether it will be high, low, or of medium height? And he would reply, this staircase is right under the palace. Don't you think that that man's statement would be well-founded? Certainly, blessed Lord. In just the same way, Potthapāda, if others ask us, what is this gross material self? What is this mind-made acquired self? What is this formless acquired self? We reply, this is the gross material self. This is the mind-made acquired self. This is the formless acquired self, for the getting rid of which we teach a doctrine whereby defiling mental states disappear, and states tending to purification grow strong, and one gains and remains in the purity and perfection of wisdom here and now, having realized and attained it by one's own wisdom. Don't you think that that statement is well-founded? Certainly, blessed Lord. At this, Citta, the son of the elephant trainer, said to the Blessed One, Blessed One, whenever the gross acquired self is present, would it be wrong to assume the existence of the mind-made acquired self, or of the formless acquired self? Does only the gross acquired self truly exist then? And similarly with the mind-made acquired self and the formless acquired self? Citta, whenever the gross acquired self is present, we do not at that time speak of a mind-made acquired self. We do not speak of a formless acquired self. We speak only of a gross acquired self. Whenever the mind-made acquired self is present, we speak only of a mind-made acquired self. And whenever the formless acquired self is present, we speak only of a formless acquired self. Citta, suppose they were to ask you, did you exist in the past or didn't you? Will you exist in the future or won't you? Do you exist now or don't you? How would you answer them? Blessed Lord, if I were asked such a question, I would reply, I did exist in the past. I did not exist. I shall exist in the future. I shall not exist. I do exist now. I do not exist. That, Blessed Lord, would be my answer. But, Citta, if they asked, the past acquired self that you had, is that your only true acquired self, and are the future and present ones false? Or is the one you will have in the future the only true one, and are the past and present ones false? Or is your present acquired self the only true one, and are the past and future ones false? How would you reply? Blessed Lord, if they asked me these things, I would reply, my past acquired self was at the time my only true one. The future and present ones were false at the time. My future acquired self will then be the only true one. The past and present ones will be false. My present acquired self is now the only true one. The past and future ones are false. That is how I would reply. In just the same way, Citta, whenever the gross acquired self is present, we do not at that time speak of a mind-made acquired self or of a formless acquired self. In just the same way, Citta, from the cow we get milk, from the milk curds, from the curd butter, from the butter ghee, and from the ghee cream of ghee. And when there is milk, we do not speak of curds, of butter, of ghee, or of cream of ghee. We speak only of milk. When there are curds, we do not speak of butter. We do not speak of ghee. We do not speak of cream of ghee. We speak only of butter. When there is cream of ghee, we do not speak of butter. We do not speak of milk. We do not speak of curds. We do not speak of ghee. We speak only of cream of ghee. So too, whenever the gross acquired self is present, we do not speak of the mind-made or formless acquired self. Whenever the mind-made acquired self is present, we do not speak of the gross or formless acquired self. Whenever the formless acquired self is present, we do not speak of the gross acquired self or the mind-made acquired self. We speak of the formless acquired self. But Citta, these are merely names, expressions, terms of speech, designations that are in common use in the world at this time, which the Tathagata uses without misapprehending them. And at these words, Potthapāda, the wanderer, said to the Blessed One, Excellent, Lord, excellent! It is as if someone were to set upright what had been knocked down, or to point out the way to one who was lost, or to bring in an oil lamp into a dark place, so that those with eyesight could see what was there. Just so, the Blessed Lord has expounded the Dhamma in various ways. Blessed Lord, I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. May the Lord Buddha accept me as a lay follower who has taken refuge in him from this day forth as long as life shall last. However, Chitta, son of the elephant trainer, said to the Lord, Magnificent Lord, magnificent! It is as if someone were to set upright what had been overturned, or to point out the way to one who was lost, or to bring in an oil lamp into a dark place, so that those with eyesight could see. Just so, the Blessed Lord has expounded the Dhamma in various ways. Lord, I go for refuge to the Lord Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. May I, Lord, receive the going forth at the Lord's hands. May I receive full ordination. And Chitta, son of the elephant trainer, received the going forth at the Lord's hands and the full ordination. And the newly ordained Venerable Chitta, residing alone, secluded, unwearying, zealous, and resolute, in a short time attained to that for the sake of which young men of good birth go forth from the household life into homelessness, that unexcelled culmination of the holy life, having realized it here and now by his own efforts and wisdom, and dwelt therein, knowing, birth is destroyed, the holy life has been lived, what had to be done has been done, there is nothing further here. And the Venerable Chitta, son of the elephant trainer, became one of the Arahants.